face like that?" the lawyer said, standing behind a hot plate. The coffee line laughed. He never looked up. Two of the people laughing had their court fines paid off by a stranger who left no name. They were standing in line to buy bread from him. In 2 months, a judge would open the red book in his apron and read their names out loud. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe so these stories keep finding you. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Elias Ward handed her the cup and made her change without looking up. Delia Prentice was 31. She was very good at her job, and she had not yet learned that being quick with your mouth and being kind were two different skills. The two associates behind her had laughed because she was the one who signed their reviews. She took her coffee and went up the steps, and by the time she reached the door, she had already forgotten she had said it. The notice was still taped to the side of the cart. A man from facilities had put it there at 7 that morning and walked off without a word, and it had been the funniest thing on that plaza all week. He waited until the line thinned out and the last of the laughing had drifted up the steps. Then he peeled the paper off slowly, the way you peel a bandage, so the tape would not take the paint with it. He folded it in 4 and put it in the front pocket of his apron, next to the book. He did not read it again.
He had read it once, and once was enough. Across the plaza, Odessa Pike was setting out buckets on the bottom step. She had a folding table, a milk crate, and more roses than anybody in Harlow County bought on a Tuesday. She watched him fold the paper. "What did it say?" she called. "Sidewalk review," he said. "What is a sidewalk review?" "I don't know yet." Odessa straightened up and put a hand on her hip. "I have been on these steps 22 years, she said. "I have seen them repaint that door 4 times. I have never once seen them tape anything to anybody's cart." Elias turned the bread. He did not answer, because he did not have an answer, and because he had learned a long time ago that people filled a silence with whatever they already believed. The courthouse was the only building in the county where everyone had to come through the same door. Lawyers came through it. So did the men who mowed the lawyers' lawns. Everybody emptied their pockets into the same gray tray. Everybody walked through the same metal frame, and the guard said good morning to all of them in the same flat voice. That was the thing about the plaza. For about 40 feet in front of those steps, the world was almost level. Elias had been parked at the edge of that 40 feet for 4 years. He knew names. He knew that the tall clerk from probate took his coffee black and hated it, and drank it black anyway because he thought sugar looked weak. He knew the bailiff's wife was sick and had been sick since spring. He knew which of the public defenders skipped lunch on filing days and which ones pretended to. Nobody knew his. To the plaza, he was the bread guy. He had never corrected anyone, because correcting people took a conversation, and a conversation invited questions, and he did not want the questions. The man came at 11. He was maybe 50, in work boots with grass stains ground into the leather, and he stood at the edge of the cart for a while before he spoke, the way men do when they have already decided the question is going to embarrass them. "They said to come pay," he said. "First floor, through the doors. Window on the left." The man nodded. He did not move. He turned his hat over once in his hands. "And if you can't," he said, "pay. All of it. Where you go for that?" Elias set down the tongs. "Basement," he said. "Take the stairs by the vending machines, not the elevator. The elevator only goes to 2. It's the last window at the end of the hall. There's no sign on it. Ask for Mara." Mara. She'll print you the form. She's the only one who will." The man looked at him for a second longer than he needed to.
Then he looked at the bread. "How much?" he said. $4. He counted what he had in his palm. He had $2 and some change, and he counted it twice, which was the part that stayed with Elias afterward, because a man who counts it twice already knows. "Never mind," he said. "What's your name?" "Roy. Roy Danner." Elias wrapped a sandwich in paper and set it on the ledge of the cart. "Put your name in the book, Roy." "I don't want charity." "It's not charity. It's a book."
Elias took it out of his apron, opened it, and wrote Roy Danner in the left column in small, square handwriting. He turned it around so Roy could see his own name sitting there in ink. "See? Now you owe me. Come back when you can." Roy Danner took the sandwich. He held it like it might be a trick. "Last window at the end of the hall," he said. "Ask for Mara." He went up the steps and through the door, and the gray tray took his belt and his keys, and he disappeared into the building. And Elias watched him go the way he watched all of them go, which was carefully.
He worked until 4. He scraped the griddle, banked the coals, wiped the ledge, and chained the cart to the post by the hydrant. There was a burn scar on the hem of his apron, low down, an old one, brown at the edges. He had never replaced the apron. Down in the basement, at the end of a hallway with no sign on it, Maura Quinn was closing her window for the day. She reached for the wire rack on the counter, the one that held the hardship forms, because she always left a few out overnight for the early people. The rack was empty. She checked the drawer underneath where she kept the spares, then the box behind her chair, then the supply cabinet at the end of the hall. Somebody had taken all of them, every last sheet, while she was at lunch. The forms did not come back the next morning. What came back instead was a man in a gray suit standing in the middle of the ground floor lobby at 8 o'clock, waiting for people to gather. Warren Pruitt had been director of court operations for 11 weeks. He was 49. He had run collections for 2 other counties before this one, and he had the kind of calm that came from never once suspecting he might be wrong. He had a laptop open on a rolling cart and a projector aimed at the wall beside the payment windows. "Good morning," he said. "This is the portal." The wall filled with a login screen, clean, blue, a field for an email address, a field for a password, and a small gray line of text at the very bottom that said the platform was operated by Meridian Civic Recovery. As of Monday, payments, payment plans, extension requests, and hardship applications all move here, Pruitt said. You will hear people complain about it. I want you to have the answer ready, so here it is. Until now, whether somebody got a break in this building depended on which window they walked up to and what kind of mood the person behind it was in. That is not fairness. That is luck. He clicked to the next screen. One process. Everyone. No exceptions, no favorites, no side doors. Nobody argued. It was hard to argue because he was not wrong about the part he was describing. He was only wrong about everything underneath it. Maura Quinn stood at the back, with her badge turned around backward on its lanyard, the way she always wore it. "The paper forms," she said. Pruitt looked up. "I'm sorry?" "The hardship forms. The rack on my counter. They were gone yesterday." "Printed forms are no longer an official channel," he said pleasantly. "Anything filed on paper has to be keyed in twice, and that is where errors live. There is a card on every counter now with the address. A card with the address. He said it the way you would say something obvious to a child, and then he moved on to the reporting dashboard, and the meeting was over 8 minutes later. Mara went back downstairs. On her counter, where the wire rack had been, somebody had left a small plastic stand holding a stack of business cards. The card had the county seal, and under it, in a font too small for anyone over 60, a web address. She took out her phone and typed it in. Nothing happened. She watched the little wheel turn and turn. She held the phone up near the ceiling tiles. She walked to the end of the hall and back. There was no signal in the basement. There had never been a signal in the basement. It was the only floor in the building where you had to file the thing you could not file. She went up to the first floor, stood by the window in the stairwell, and got it to load. Then the screen asked her to create an account. And to create an account, it wanted an email address, and it wanted her to confirm that email address by clicking a link sent to that email address. She stood there for a moment, thinking about the man in work boots who had come to her window the day before and asked her 3 separate times whether he was signing the right line. At 6 that evening, she stayed late to reconcile the day's receipts, which was not her job, but the clerk who normally did it had a class on Tuesdays, and Mara had never been good at going home.
She was scrolling the payment history, looking for a duplicate, when she noticed the line, paid in full, third party. She kept scrolling. There was another one, 11 days earlier. Another, the month before. She widened the date range and went back a year, and they were everywhere, scattered through the record like stitches, 30 or 40 of them, maybe more. Small amounts, nobody famous. Traffic, equipment violations, failure to appear, court costs. Paid in full, third party. Paid in full, third party. She sat back in her chair. It had to be a data entry error, she decided. Somebody had a macro, or a stuck key, or a bad import from the old system. She flagged the date range in a note to herself to ask about it in the morning, and she shut the terminal down, and she went home and worked her shift at the warehouse until midnight. Out on the plaza that same evening, a young woman came down the steps and sat on the second one from the bottom, and cried, with her hand over her mouth so it would not make noise. Elias let her be for a while. Then he walked over with a cup of coffee and put it on the step beside her, not in her hands, on the step, so she did not have to take anything from anybody. "Portal?" he said. She nodded. "You have an email?" She shook her head. He waited. "I had one," she said. "It was on the phone. The phone's gone." "What's your name?" She told him. He asked for her case number, and she read it off the folded paper in her fist, and he wrote both of them down in the small red book. He did not say anything about what he was going to do with it. He never did. Then he took 2 20s out of his apron pocket and folded them into her hand and closed her fingers over them before she could get a word out. "That's for the phone," he said. "Not for them. Get the phone back first." Delia Prentice came out of the building behind them with her coat over her arm and stopped when she saw the book. "That thing is getting fat," she said. "You're going to need a second volume. Honestly, half this county must owe you a sandwich." Elias closed the book. "Something like that," he said. 2 floors up, at the window at the end of the executive corridor, Warren Pruitt stood with his hands behind his back and watched the whole thing. He watched the bread man cross the plaza with a coffee. He watched him crouch down. He watched him take money out of the pocket of his apron and put it into the hand of a woman who was crying on the courthouse steps. And then he watched him take out a small red book and write something in it. He stood there for a long time after they had both gone. Then he went back to his office and asked his assistant to pull the permit file on the cart. They came for Odessa Pike on a Thursday. 2 men from facilities, both of them polite, both of them holding a printout. The bottom step and the landing were an emergency egress route, the printout said, and vendors could not obstruct an emergency egress route. It had been true for 22 years. Nobody had ever printed it before. What was also true, and was not on the printout, was that the county had hired a photographer for the new services brochure, and the photographer had asked whether anything could be done about the buckets. Odessa did not argue. That was the part Elias could not stand. She thanked them. She said of course she understood. She did not want to cause anybody trouble. Then she folded the legs of her table in and stacked her milk crates and carried the roses to her car in 2 trips because she was 63 and the buckets were heavy with water. Nobody helped her because nobody was sure it was allowed. Elias came out from behind the cart and took the second load. She let him. Neither of them said anything the whole way to the car. 22 years, he said finally. They were nice about it, Odessa said, and shut the trunk. The public meeting on the service contract was the following Tuesday in the second-floor hearing room at 4 in the afternoon, which is the hour local government chooses when it does not want a crowd. 11 people came. Elias was one of them. He put his name on the speaker sheet and waited an hour and 40 minutes through the drainage easement and the animal shelter budget. And when they called him, he stood up and did not use the podium microphone properly, so the first 4 words were lost. "Sorry," he said. "Let me start again." He had not written anything down. "I stand about 40 feet from that door 6 days a week," he said. "So I see people come out. And what I want to tell you is that most of them do not know there is a form. Not that they filled it out wrong. They do not know it exists. Nobody in that building is required to tell them. And now the one place that used to hand it to them has a card on the counter instead. And the card sends them to a website. And the people I am talking about are the exact people who cannot get to a website." He paused. "That is all. I'm not asking you to change the contract. I'm asking you to put the paper back on the counter."
There was a silence, of the kind that can go either way. Then Warren Pruitt leaned into his microphone, and he did not raise his voice, and he did not insult anybody, which was what made it work. "You sell bread," he said. "This contract is 40 pages. Somebody laughed. 2 people laughed. Delia Prentice, sitting in the 3rd row because a partner had told her to observe, laughed too, and then heard herself and stopped. Elias said thank you and sat down. Downstairs the next morning, Mara Quinn came in early with a ream of paper she had bought herself and a printer she had carried from her apartment in a canvas bag, and she printed 60 copies of the hardship form on her own machine, in her own hallway, on her own time. Roy Danner came at 10. He came to the last window at the end of the hall with no sign on it, and he said the bread man had sent him, and Mara said she knew, and she slid the form across the counter with a pen on top of it. He signed it. He signed it in 11 seconds, at the bottom, without turning a page. "Mr. Danner," Mara said, "do you want to look at part 2? "It's fine. It's about your income. If you don't fill in part 2, they'll deny it." He looked at the form. He looked at it for a while, and his jaw worked, and she watched his eyes go across the same line 3 times without moving down. Mara came out from behind the window. She did not say anything about it, and she did not ask. She just took the pages and stood next to him at the end of the hall, where the vending machines hummed and nobody walked, and she read the whole thing out loud, one section at a time, and wrote his answers in for him while he told her what they were. It took 19 minutes.
$212 originally. An equipment violation on the truck, a broken lamp over the plate. He had not paid it, so it had grown.
It was $340 now, and his license was suspended, and he could not drive to the properties he mowed. And he could not mow the properties he could not drive to, and so he could not pay the $340 that was the reason he could not drive. "That's the whole thing," he said, when she read the last line back to him. "That's the whole entire thing right there." "I know," she said. The written warning came 4 days later. It was 1 page. It said that an employee had used personal equipment to produce and distribute county forms outside the official channel, that this created a record's integrity risk, and that any repetition would be treated as a disciplinary matter. It was signed by her supervisor, who did not look at her when he handed it over. At the bottom, in the reference line, it cited a directive by number. Mara read the number twice. She had worked in that building for 6 years, and she had never seen that directive. She searched the shared drive for it. It was not there. She asked her supervisor where she could read it, and he said he would find out, and he did not find out. That evening, Roy Danner walked across the plaza with an envelope in his hand and stood at the cart until Elias looked up. "They sent me this." Elias wiped his hands on the apron and took it. It was a notice. 30 days. Roy turned his hat over once. "So does this mean I have to go to court?" he said. "Or does it mean I have to pay?" Elias read it again, slowly, hoping he was wrong. It meant both. Roy Danner tried the portal twice. The first time was at the public library on a Saturday, on a computer with a timer in the corner of the screen, counting down his 40 minutes. It wanted an email address. He made one. It sent a link to the email address to confirm the email address, and the link did not arrive while he was sitting there, and his 40 minutes ran out. The second time was on his neighbor's phone. He got the password wrong 3 times, and the account locked. He did not tell Mara, and he did not tell the bread man, and he did not tell his neighbor why he had wanted the phone. He was 52 years old, and he had already been made to feel stupid twice that month by machines. And there is a point where a man decides he would rather take the consequence than ask for help again. So he went to work. He borrowed a ride from a cousin, and he cut grass for 2 weeks, and he kept the notice folded in the visor of a truck he was not allowed to drive. On the 3rd Tuesday, at 11:30 in the morning, he came back to the plaza to ask one more time. That is the hour when the courthouse empties for lunch. There were maybe 60 people on those steps. Clerks with badges on lanyards, 2 juries let out at the same time. Delia Prentice and her associates coming back with sandwiches from the place on the corner that was not Elias. 2 deputies came out of the door and said his name like a question. Roy stopped. He said yes. He said it politely, the way he said everything. They told him there was a warrant, failure to appear. They were not rough about it, and they were not cruel, and one of them said sorry twice, and it did not matter, because he took Roy's wrists and put them behind his back on the courthouse steps in front of 60 people at lunchtime, and the sound the cuffs made carried all the way across the plaza. Somebody's fork stopped halfway to their mouth. Elias came out from behind the cart. He did not run, and he did not shout. He walked over with his hands still greasy and stood a respectful distance from the deputies, and he said, "How much is the warrant?" "Sir, step back. I'm not touching anybody. How much is it?" One of them checked the tablet. 340. Elias reached into the front pocket of his apron. He carried cash because half his customers did, and he counted it out right there on the lid of the ice chest, in 20s, one at a time, so everyone could see him do it. He squared the stack with 2 fingers,
"That's paid," he said.
For about 4 seconds, nothing moved on that plaza. Then Warren Pruitt came down the steps. He had a lanyard and a folder, and the unhurried walk of a man who has been told there is a situation. He looked at the money on the ice chest lid. He looked at Roy Danner standing in handcuffs in the sun. He looked at Elias. "That's not how payment is made," he said. "He's standing right there. Payments go through the portal. Then put it through the portal. The portal is down for scheduled maintenance until 2.
Pruitt said it without any pleasure at all, which somehow made it worse. "And I do not have the authority to accept currency from a member of the public on a sidewalk. Neither do they. Nobody in this county does." The terrible part was that he was right. That was the thing Elias would think about for months afterward. Not that Pruitt was corrupt, that Pruitt was correct. Every sentence the man said was accurate, and every rule he cited existed. And he had built a machine where a man could go to jail for $340, while $340 sat in the sun, 8 feet away from the person collecting it. "He'll be arraigned this afternoon or tomorrow," Pruitt said. "He can request a hearing at that time." "He can't read the request." Pruitt paused for half a second. Then he said, "Then someone should help him with that." And he turned around and went back up the steps. They walked Roy to the car. He did not look at anybody, and everybody looked at him. At the door, he turned his head and said, over his shoulder, to nobody in particular, "Somebody tell my cousin about the truck." The door shut. The car pulled out past the hydrant. The money stayed on the lid of the ice chest. Elias did not pick it up. He stood there with the wind moving the corner of the top bill, and Odessa Pike watched him from the parking meter where she now sold her roses. And Delia Prentice stood on the other side of the plaza holding a sandwich she had stopped eating, and she did not turn away, and she did not go inside. The stack sat there for 11 minutes before he put it back in his pocket. Up on the steps, Pruitt's assistant lowered her phone. She had started recording when the deputies came out, the way people do now, without deciding to. "Do you want me to delete that?" she said. "No," Pruitt said. "Keep it. That is exactly the friction point I have been describing. If we can show them what enforcement looks like at street level, the funding conversation gets a lot shorter." He said it the way another man would say, "Pass the salt." That night, Elias did not pack up. He sat on the bottom step with the cart chained behind him, and the plaza going dark, and the red book open across his knees. And he turned back to the first page, 4 years ago, the first name he had ever written in it. He went forward from there, page after page. Hundreds of names, small square handwriting, a case number beside each one, an amount beside that. Every one of them paid. Every one of them a person who had walked out of that building lighter than they walked in, and not one of them had ever known why. And not a single name in the entire book had done one thing to stop what happened on that plaza this morning. The complaint Warren Pruitt filed on Friday morning ran to a page and a half, and the frightening thing about it was how reasonable it sounded. An individual operating a vending cart on county property, it said, had been observed on multiple occasions providing cash to members of the public immediately outside the courthouse and recording those transactions in a private ledger. The recipients were persons with active financial obligations to the court. The individual maintained a written record of names, case numbers, and amounts. In the absence of a lending license, and given the proximity to the court and the vulnerability of the population involved, the matter warranted review. Every sentence in it was a true observation. Every sentence in it was wrong. 2 deputies came at 11. They were apologetic. They had a form. They asked him to produce the ledger, and Elias reached into the front pocket of his apron and handed it over without a word. They put it in a clear plastic bag and wrote a number on the tag with a marker. They gave him the yellow copy of the receipt and asked him to sign the white one. He signed it. "You want to say anything?" one of them asked. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. "For the report." "No." Odessa Pike had come across from the parking meter, and she waited until they were gone. "Why in God's name did you not say one word?" she said. "You could have told them what that book is in about 9 seconds. "Because anything I say now is a statement," Elias said. "And a statement in 9 seconds is a statement I never get back." She looked at him for a long moment. "How does a man who sells bread know a thing like that?" He did not answer that either. The vending permit came back suspended that afternoon, pending review. A citation was issued for operating without a valid permit, and there was a line at the bottom of the notice, added by hand, that said the permit holder was not to occupy the plaza pending disposition of the matter. So at 3:30, in front of everybody, Elias unchained the cart from the post by the hydrant and pushed it off the plaza by hand. It was heavy. It was built to be towed, not pushed. He got it moving with his shoulder against the handle and the front wheel fighting him the whole way. And the plaza went quiet in sections as he passed, the way a room goes quiet when somebody is being walked out of it. At the corner, one of the deputies who had taken the book caught up with him. "Let me get the front," he said. "You'll get written up." "Probably." They took it up 9th Street together, 3 blocks, past the bail bonds place and the closed florist and the parking deck. Neither of them said anything the whole way. At the loading gate, the deputy set the front down, straightened up, and looked at the sidewalk for a second. "For what it's worth," he said, "I read the first page before we bagged it." Then he went back toward the courthouse. Elias stood there with his hand still on the handle. Behind him, the whole plaza had watched every step of it, and nobody had laughed this time, which was almost worse. Mara Quinn was suspended the same day. The reason on the letter was unauthorized access and disclosure of records. What had actually happened was that Meridian Civic Recovery had flagged a query. A county employee outside the finance role had pulled a 12-month transaction report and had been asking, in writing on the internal system, about a category of payment she had no business asking about. They did not let her clear her desk. A man from security walked beside her to the elevator, and up and across the lobby and out the front door. And he apologized the entire way, and she thanked him, because none of it was his fault either. She stood on the sidewalk in the cold for about 2 minutes. Then she turned around and walked back. She went up the steps and got in the public line behind a man with a folder and a woman holding a summons, and she put her keys and her phone in the gray tray, and she walked through the metal frame, and the guard said good morning to her in the same flat voice he used for everybody, and did not seem to notice that she had come out of that same door 8 minutes earlier with an escort. At the front counter, she asked for a public records request form. The clerk was somebody she had eaten lunch with maybe 50 times. "Mara?" "I'm here as a member of the public," Mara said. "You have to take it." The clerk took it. She wrote it out carefully because she had spent 6 years watching people lose things on technicalities. All directives issued by the Office of Court Operations concerning the availability, distribution, or format of hardship and fee waiver applications. All contracts, amendments, and addenda between the county and Meridian Civic Recovery. A date range that began 2 weeks before Warren Pruitt started and ended that morning. She dated it, signed it, and got a stamped copy for herself. Then, because she was already inside, and because a member of the public is allowed to do this, She went to the terminal in the records room that anybody can use, and she typed in the first case number she remembered from the flagged report. Paid in full. Third party. She clicked the third party. 9th Street Trust. She had never heard of it. It was not a bank. It was not a bail company. It was not one of the church funds. She searched the clerk's own filings, and there it was, registered years ago, a single page, and attached to it a signature card. And on the signature card there was one signature, and one signature only. No company behind it, no board, no agent for service with a law firm's name on it. One person, with authority to move everything in that account. And the signature was a single fast stroke of black ink that she could not read, no matter how long she looked at it. She printed the page, and she paid the copy fee out of her own pocket, because she was a member of the public now. The records packet came 4 days before the hearing. It arrived in a brown envelope with the county seal, and she opened it on the floor of her apartment because she did not own a table big enough. The first thing she found was the directive, the number from her written warning, the one that was not on the shared drive, the one nobody could tell her where to read. 2 paragraphs.
All printed hardship and fee waiver applications are to be removed from public counters. All inquiries are to be directed to the online portal. Signed at the bottom in a neat, controlled hand. Warren Pruitt. The second thing she found was on the very last page, swept into the envelope because it fell inside the date range she had asked for, and probably because nobody had read the whole stack before they sealed it. It was an addendum to his employment terms. It set out how his performance compensation was calculated. It was calculated on the collection rate. Courtroom 2 was not built for an audience. It had 6 rows, a radiator that knocked, and a window that had been painted shut sometime during a previous administration. Odessa Pike sat in the front row with her purse in her lap. Delia Prentice sat in the back, alone, in a coat she had not taken off, and she could not have told anybody why she had come. Elias Ward sat at the defense table by himself. No counsel, no folder. He had a citation and a pen. Judge Adeline Voss had been on that bench for 19 years. She was not warm. She ran a tight docket, and she did not care who your uncle was. And if you were late, she said so in front of everyone. The county attorney went first. The citation was straightforward. Operating a vending unit on county property under a suspended permit. But the county was also asking the court to make a referral for investigation, and to support that, he offered the ledger. He held up the plastic bag with the tag on it. The defendant kept a written record of loans made to persons with active obligations to this court, he said. Names, case numbers, amounts. We are asking that it be referred. Let me see it, Voss said. The bailiff carried it up. She took the book out of the bag and put on her glasses and turned pages for what felt to everyone in that room like a very long time. Counselor, she said. There were 3 columns. Yes, Your Honor. Name, case number, amount. What is the 4th? He came forward and looked. There was a narrow ruled column on the right side of the page, drawn in by hand, with a heading in small square handwriting. Received, he said. Received, she repeated. So that is what came back in. That is our understanding. Judge Voss turned to the front of the book, then to the middle, then to the last written page. She did it slowly, and the radiator knocked twice, and nobody said anything. What does that column total? She said. The county attorney looked at his notes. He looked at the ledger. He did not answer, because he had not looked at that column, because nobody had. Elias stood up. Nothing, Your Honor, he said. That's the whole book.
Judge Voss took her glasses off. "Madam Clerk," she said, "take 3 entries at random. Not the first 3. Random. Pull those case numbers in our payment system and read me the disposition." It took 4 minutes. The clerk read them out one at a time, and each time she got to the end of the line, she paused, because the line ended the same way. Paid in full. Third party. Paid in full. Third party. Paid in full. Third party. On the second one, a man in the third row stood halfway up, the way people do when their own name is read out in a room where they did not expect to hear it. Then he sat back down. On the third, a woman near the door put her hand over her mouth and left it there. Judge Voss saw both of them. She did not ask. She let it sit. "And who is the third party?" Voss said. "Ninth Street Trust, Your Honor."
"Is that entity known to this court?"
The clerk had been in that building longer than the judge had. She said, carefully, that it was, in the sense that it appeared in the payment record regularly, and had for about 4 years, and that if the court wanted the figure, she could give it. Give it. She gave it. Then she added, because she had run the numbers the night before and had not slept much, that over that period, the trust had cleared more court debt for residents of Harlow County than the county's own hardship program had. The radiator knocked. The man in the third row was still looking at the back of Elias Ward's head. He was the tall one from probate, the one who took his coffee black and hated it. He had bought it from that cart 3 mornings a week for 4 years, and he had never once asked the man his name. "I want the registration," Voss said, "and the signature card." The clerk had it ready. She had it ready because a suspended records employee had printed it 4 days earlier and paid the copy fee out of her own pocket, and had left one with the clerk on her way out.
Judge Voss read the card. "Ninth Street Trust," she said. "1 trustee. Sole signature authority." She looked up over the top of her glasses at the defense table. Elias Ward. In the back row, Delia Prentice sat up so fast her coat slid off the bench. "That's me," Elias said. "Say it into the microphone." "That's me, Your Honor. Same name that is on this citation." "Yes." "Mr. Ward," Voss said, "where does that money come from?" "I sold a company 8 years ago. I moved almost all of it into the trust." "What company?" "Kestrel Payments." Somebody in the second row took out a phone, which is not permitted, and the bailiff did not stop them, which was also not permitted. Then a second phone came out. Then a third. Delia Prentice did not take hers out. She had been holding it in her hand for a minute already. She typed in the name of the company. What came back was the sale, 8 years old, and a photograph of a woman at a podium in a blue jacket, and that woman's name in every headline. The co-founder. The one who had done the interviews and the conferences and the covers. She scrolled. She kept scrolling. There were no pictures of him. Not one. He had built the thing out of a back room and let somebody else stand in front of it. And when the sale closed, he had gone quiet. And the lists that track that kind of money had taken his name off entirely, because the money was no longer in his name. The third article down was 3 years old, and the headline was a question. Where did Elias Ward go? Delia read the first paragraph of it. It said he had probably lost it. She set the phone face down on her knee and did not pick it up again. "Madam Clerk," Judge Voss said, "for the record, not the dollars, how many people?" The clerk did not have to look it up. She had written it at the top of her legal pad that morning, and she had been staring at it on and off ever since. 904, Your Honor, in this county alone. Judge Voss set the signature card down.
"There is a woman at the back of my courtroom who has been standing since we started," she said. "Ma'am." Mara Quinn came forward with a brown envelope. "I filed a public records request," she said. "It was granted. I'm here as a member of the public." "Do you have your stamped copy?" "Yes, Your Honor." She handed up 2 documents. The first was a directive, 2 paragraphs. All printed hardship and fee waiver applications are to be removed from public counters. All inquiries are to be directed to the online portal. Signed at the bottom in a neat, controlled hand. The second was an addendum to an employment agreement, setting out how performance compensation was to be calculated. Judge Voss read them both. Then she read them both again. She did not say anything about them. She put them down and squared the edges with 2 fingers. And everyone in that room understood that something had just been entered into the record that was not going to come back out. "Mr. Ward," she said, "one more question, and then I am going to rule." "Yes, Your Honor." "There are 93 counties in this state. Why this one?" Elias reached into his shirt pocket and took out a folded square of paper that had been folded and unfolded so many times it had gone soft at the creases. He read a case number off it, and the clerk typed it in. It was old. It predated the current system, so it came up in the archive format, gray text on gray. The defendant's name was Tobias Ward. The original amount was $212. He had been held 9 days. And in the field, where the court is required to record its finding on whether the person was able to pay, there was nothing. Not a no, not a yes. A blank line, in a form, in a building, on an ordinary Tuesday, 12 years ago. Judge Voss looked at that blank line for a long moment. She had been on this bench for 19 years, and 12 years ago, she had been sitting exactly where she was sitting now. "The citation is dismissed," she said. "The referral request is denied. The ledger is returned to Mr. Ward." Then she did not adjourn. "Madam Clerk," she said, "pull every case in this county with a bench warrant issued for failure to appear since the date that portal policy took effect. All of them. I want the number before I leave this room." The clerk typed for 6 minutes while nobody moved. Then she looked up. 61, Your Honor." Judge Voss vacated all 61 of them. She did it from the bench that same week in one sitting, and she set every single case for a new review. And she said one thing on the record that the local paper printed the next morning, and that people in that county repeated to each other for a long time afterward. "Before this court puts a person in a cell for not paying," she said, "it is required to ask that person why they did not pay. That has been the law since long before I sat down here. It is not a courtesy. It is a step. And we skipped it. And I signed the paper that skipped it." Roy Danner came out on the 4th day. There was no crowd. There was no camera. There was a chain-link gate and a plastic bag with his belt and his wallet and the folded notice from his visor, and Odessa Pike waiting in a borrowed pickup with the heater going because it had turned cold. The surcharge was canceled. The failure to appear was struck. The suspension came off his license in 11 days, and he went back to cutting grass in the 2nd week of the month. And the first thing he did with the first money he made was pay his cousin for the gas. Nobody gave Roy Danner anything. That is important, and it is the part people got wrong when they told the story later. He was not rescued, and he was not rewarded. He was given back exactly what had been taken off him, and nothing more. and it had cost 4 days of his life and a job he almost did not get back to get it. The public hearing on the Meridian contract was held in the same second-floor room where 11 people had once shown up to talk about drainage easements. This time, there were not enough chairs. 4 employees from the Office of Court Operations testified. Not one of them accused Warren Pruitt of anything. Not one of them raised their voice or called him a name. They simply described in order what they had been asked to do. A woman from the payment window said she had been instructed to answer questions about hardship applications with the sentence, "That information is available on the portal," and to use that sentence exactly and not to add anything to it. A supervisor said the collection rate was reviewed every Monday and that the review was the first item on the agenda every Monday. The young man from intake was 24, and it was the first time he had ever spoken into a microphone. He said he had asked twice, in writing, whether they could keep a small stack of paper forms behind the counter for the people who could not use the portal. Somebody on the panel asked what the answer had been. There wasn't one, he said. Either time? Either time. Do you still have the emails? He said he did. He said he had printed them both the night he sent the second one and had kept them in his locker ever since, and that he could not have explained at the time why he did that.
He thought now that he had known. Warren Pruitt was sitting in the second row with his hands folded. He did not object, and he did not write anything down. He looked at the back of that young man's head with an expression that 3 different people in the room described 3 different ways afterward. And the only thing any of them agreed on was that it was not anger. The last one said she had printed the friction point slide herself. It took under an hour. When it was over, nobody applauded. Because there was nothing to applaud.
The State Association of Court Administrators withdrew his invitation to give the opening address at their spring conference. They did it by email, in 3 sentences, and they did not say why. That was the one that landed. Warren Pruitt had never wanted money the way other men want money. He wanted to be the person other counties called. He wanted to stand at the front of a ballroom and explain how it was done. He had built the whole thing so that he could stand in that ballroom. And the ballroom was the thing they took.
He resigned 8 days later. He carried his own box out. Nobody offered to help him, and he did not ask. He came down the steps with a monitor stand and a coffee mug and a framed certificate wedged in sideways. And at the bottom of the steps, the door to the parking side stuck, the way it had stuck for years, and his hands were full. Odessa Pike put down her bucket and opened it for him. She did not say anything. She had spent 22 years on those steps, and she had opened that door for hundreds of people. And she was not going to start deciding who deserved it now. Warren Pruitt stopped for half a second. He looked at her. He gave a small nod, the kind you give when you have run out of sentences. Then he went to his car. Delia Prentice found the cart on 9th Street 2 days after the hearing, in the spot where the sidewalk widens by the parking deck. Because the permit was still in review, and the plaza was still off limits. She stood there for a while, with her hands in her coat pockets. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this since Thursday," she said, "and everything I come up with sounds like a deposition." "You don't have to say it. I know. That's worse." She looked at the griddle instead of at him. "I have a good salary, and I bill $400 an hour to a company that makes garage door openers. I want to work for the trust. I'll take whatever it pays. I'm not being noble. I just cannot sit in that office anymore." Elias turned the bread. "No," he said. She blinked. "There are people going through that metal detector every single morning," he said.
and about half of them are walking in there with nobody standing next to them. Not one person. They sit in that hallway all day, trying to figure out which line is theirs. He looked up. You already have the license. You already have the parking pass. You're already in the building. Start there. That's not a job. No, he agreed. It's Tuesday mornings. She was quiet for a second. That's a very annoying answer, she said. I know. They gave him the book back on a Friday, in the plastic bag, with the evidence tag still stapled through the corner. He could have cut the tag off. He had scissors in the cart. He looked at it for a while, and then he put the book back in the front pocket of his apron, with the tag still on it, where it caught on the fabric every time he took it out, which was the point.
The story ran in the paper on Saturday morning. By Saturday afternoon, it had been picked up statewide. And the registration page for 9th Street Trust is a public document with a mailing address and an email address printed on it, because that is what the law requires. 400 applications came in the first 6 hours. By Sunday morning, it was over 2,000, and they were still arriving. And Elias sat in a rented room above a hardware store with his laptop open and the messages loading in blocks of 50, and understood, finally and completely, what he had actually lost that week.
It was not his privacy. It was the mechanism. 4 years of it. Quiet, small, one name at a time, working perfectly. And it had only ever worked because nobody knew it was there. He tried for 3 days. He read every message that came in. He answered 109 of them. Somewhere in the middle of the second night, he found himself with 2 files open beside each other. A woman in the north end of the county and a man 2 counties over. Roughly the same amount, roughly the same story. And he had money for one of them that week, and not the other. He sat there with his hand on the trackpad and made a choice. He could not tell anyone afterward what the reason had been. There had not really been a reason. The woman had written more carefully. That was all. She had used paragraphs. And that was when he heard it, word for word, in a gray suit, in the lobby, on the morning the forms disappeared. Whether somebody got a break in this building depended on which window they walked up to and what kind of mood the person behind it was in. That is not fairness.
That is luck. Warren Pruitt had been right about the disease. He had just prescribed the wrong medicine, and then he had gotten rich off the prescription. And none of that changed the fact that Elias Ward had spent 4 years being exactly the window Pruitt described. A good window, a generous one. Still a window. Still a man deciding on a Tuesday with no criteria he could write down who was going to get out from under it and who was going to keep carrying it. He shut the laptop. He asked for the meeting on a Monday, and he got it on a Wednesday, in the chief clerk's office, with Judge Voss standing by the window, because she did not sit down in other people's offices. He put 1 page on the desk. The trust moves into the building, it said. Ground floor, past the metal detector, before the payment windows, where people already are. It has a desk, a chair, a phone line, and a budget. It has written eligibility criteria that anybody can read before they apply, and an appeal if they are turned down. The money transfers in full. And you run it? The chief clerk said. No, Voss turned around from the window. I fund it, Elias said. I don't decide anything. I don't see the applications. I don't get told who applied. If I ever want to know, the answer is no. That's an unusual amount of money to hand somebody and then walk away from. It's the only part that matters. The chief clerk looked at the page for a while.
"Who staffs it?" she said. Elias told her the name. "She's suspended," the chief clerk said.
"She's suspended for handing out the form," Elias said. "That's the job description." They opened the window on a Monday in the middle of February. There was no banner, there was no press release and no ribbon, and nobody from the county said any words at a podium, because Judge Voss had said, when it was suggested, that they had done quite enough talking in that building already. There was a desk, there was a chair, there was a phone with a cord on it, because half the people who needed it did not have a phone of their own. There was a sign, plain, black on white, that said what it was in 5 words. And there was a wire rack bolted to the front edge of the desk, filled with forms, at the height of a person's hand. Not behind the counter, not in a drawer, not on a shelf you had to ask somebody to reach. At the height of a hand, on the public side, where you could take one and put it in your coat and walk away and never say a word to anyone about it. That was the whole thing. That was every part of it. Roy Danner was first in line. He did not need anything. His license was back, and his fine was gone, and he had work through the spring. He stood in that line for 20 minutes with his hat in his hands, and when he got to the front, Mara asked him what she could help him with, and he said nothing at all, ma'am. And he took a form off the rack anyway and folded it into his shirt pocket. "I just wanted to stand in it once," he said, "when I wasn't scared."
Delia Prentice was there on the second morning, in the waiting chairs by the wall, sitting next to a man in a windbreaker who was holding a summons. She was writing on a legal pad. Neither she nor Elias mentioned it, that day or any day after. At the end of the first week, Mara found him out on the plaza, where the permit had finally come back and the cart was chained to the post by the hydrant again. 94 people, she said, in 5 days. Elias nodded. They stood there for a minute, in the cold.
"My father signed things he couldn't read," he said. "For 9 days, nobody in that building read him one single page out loud. That's it. That's the whole story. That's all it would have taken." Mara looked at the door of the courthouse, and at the gray tray, and at the guard saying good morning to everybody in the same flat voice. "Then I'll read them out loud," she said. "Every one. Every time." That was the entire conversation. Neither of them said anything else about it, then or later. And whatever else was there between them was allowed to take its time, the way things do when both people have decided they are not going anywhere. The next morning, he got there before the sun was properly up. The plaza was empty. The steam came off the griddle straight up into the cold. He tied on the apron with the burn on the hem, the way he had every morning for 4 years, and he set out the paper and the tongs and the coffee and the small red book with the evidence tag still stapled through the corner of the cover. Then he took a stack of forms out of the cart and set them on the corner of the counter, next to the napkins. A man came across the plaza with his collar up, on his way to the door. He slowed down. He looked at the stack for a second, and then he took one, and he folded it into his jacket, and he kept walking. He did not ask anybody's permission. He did not have to say what it was for. He did not thank anyone, and there was nobody to thank. Elias never looked up. He reached down with one hand and turned a piece of bread on the griddle.
If somebody was decent to you once, back when you had nothing to give them in return, we would love to hear about them. Leave their name down in the comments, and stay with us for the next one.